Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President, Product and Technology, Expedia Group, Arthur Chapin, in discussion with editor Skift Airline Weekly, Madhu Unikrishnan.
Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. And I recognize all of you that we're standing between you and the coffee break, so our apologies, and we'll just bear with us. And also, before we get started, please, you can submit your questions on the app, and you can also thumbs up and thumbs down questions you want to see answered, which we'll do at the end of the session. So Arthur, I wanted to talk to you a little bit first about the importance of supply and how Expedia uses technology to grow its supply of inventory and manage sort of the people on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So supply is a core value prop that Expedia offers, not just in lodging, but all sort of products that come together to make your complete trip. So we invest heavily in things like machine learning to help inform our account management team on like the best opportunity and work closely with partners, and then have been exposing those same capabilities to partners so that they can make great business decisions and really figure out how to best leverage our marketplace. After all, the best way to grow supply is really to be super relevant to that supply. So that's the first area that we spend a fair amount of time working on. The second is creating new tools and capabilities such as revenue management, or even things like white label that allow our partners to have access to products like dynamic packaging, et cetera. So we're sort of taking all of the different components of technology that we've built across Expedia Group and looking at ways to turn it into products and services that really are value adds to our partners.
Right. And what would you say a differentiator is with Expedia in increasing its supply?
In terms of technology temperature? Yeah, so number one, we have access to probably more travel information than most, right, between all of those different products. So revenue management and just building those products that are really sticky and help our partners grow their business is one of the key differentiators. The other one is, as I mentioned, going to be products that we can take that are currently built for our consumer experiences and then help our partners leverage them like white label. In addition to that, we're continuing to sort of tune and build technology based on data that's derived not only from customer experience on our site, but also within just all the connection points that we see, all the different travel products that are out there. Each one has data that essentially helps inform decisions you'd want to make about the next piece. So the fully connected trip is something that we talk a lot about, and we feel like we have a set of data that is really powerful, not only to us, but also to our partners to help to create better guest experiences.
Well, to move on, Skift Research often hears that companies need to develop a product mindset. How does a company with a product mindset work? And if you could paint a picture for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I would say Expedia has certainly believes that we have a strong product mindset, but it really does start with the customer. So I often, when talking about product mindset, people go right to sort of technology or just basic product approaches. The real product mindset is one that is really centered on customer research and deeply understanding customer needs. So when we talk about product mindset at Expedia, it's about a strong research organization. It's about fully understanding sort of the journey that our customers go through from discovery, shopping, actual travel, and post-travel, and then going and identifying pain point by pain point, where can we help customers have better shopping and travel experiences.
Well, can we go a little bit deeper into that? So when you identify pain points, what are some of those pain points and how are you managing for them?
Yeah, so they're everything from like really broad pain points of I have a larger family and I need to find a property and find a way of getting to that property that meets my needs. And so vacation rentals being obviously a prime opportunity for large families or families of young kids. I myself have a 5-year-old and have felt that pain very real in terms of wanting to have a kitchen and things like that. So building specific tools and capabilities that help people navigate the millions of sort of options for them down to just the things that meet their specific needs. So there's really point sort of areas that we can dig into, but then there's also broader opportunities that we're just starting to look at. Verbo has started to test and release group sort of planning tools that we see as a whole new area of opportunity in terms of using technology to help people make travel planning easier.
Can you explain that a little further?
Yeah, so Verbo has started to build essentially the idea of within their app, you can invite people to join you essentially on your trip planning, and I can express to you what's important to me. You can express what's important to you. We can vote on it, and we can really sort of have a collaborative experience as we pick out the product that we want to, or the place we want to stay.
Wow, that is really collaborative. So in other words, if you're planning group travel with a group, each member of that group can vote on the things they wanted.
And the idea is to do it in one place that everybody sort of can go and revolve around versus it being in online spreadsheets and random instant messages. And it's just, if you've ever planned travel with a larger group or a family reunion or things like that, it's really, really complex. So the more that we can pull pain out of that experience, the better for our customers.
And well, this is specific to Verbo. Is it something you're exploring across all your brands?
Yeah, so one of the advantages that we have at Expedia Group is we have a large number of brands that are constantly testing and innovating, and we look to then take those products that work really well and bring them across the Expedia Group platform. So we'll absolutely be having conversations about, are these the types of things that would be beneficial to an Expedia traveler or a Hotels.com traveler, et cetera.
Right. Well, since you mentioned Verbo and what you're solving for now, what are some of the other problems you're solving for now, and what are sort of the challenges you face across the travel experience?
Yeah, so there's two core areas that we talk a lot about. The first is, if we rewind, over the past several years, we've become really good at selling a product. So selling a flight, selling a room, things like that, we're actually pretty good at. But what we haven't necessarily tackled as an industry is thinking about it in the way a traveler does, which is that complete trip. Right? Our travelers really think about their travel as one thing. They don't think about it as these individual products that they purchase. They think about it as this full trip, and they're doing that to achieve some experience. And that means that there's a real opportunity for us to connect all those pieces together. So we're thinking a lot about this idea of sort of a connected trip and how a change early in the trip has so many downstream ramifications, and are things that we can do by connecting all the products that you need on your trip together to help make your trip truly frictionless. So that's the first area that we're starting to put a fair amount of effort into. The second is as we try and tune ourselves and make ourselves as sort of locally relevant for our customers, but on a global basis. So sort of for all of our points of sale, that's a real challenge, because it's very hard to manually know what's important for every type of traveler in every country or region. So machine learning is a great opportunity and a great technology that can be employed to help to ensure that the products that you're giving people, not only in terms of large components of the site, but also just tuning things like what filters show and what recommendations show up, et cetera. So we've started working on machine learning capabilities that not only will do things like make sure that the filters that we show and the things that we recommend to you are very tuned to both your trip type, but also the region or the place that you're going. But then also looking at how we could use those things to determine what content we show you and what components and how the site actually is formed.
I want to talk about I want to return to machine learning, for sure, but there's something you said a few minutes ago that I wanted to revisit, and that is the sort of a problem that starts earlier in the travel experience or in the journey, and how that's communicated to the other components. So for example, if your flight is delayed by 6 hours, do you have the capability to inform the hotel that to hold on to the booking?
Yeah, it's one of the areas that we feel we can truly create a product that differentiates how people experience a trip. So we have the ability today to communicate with the hotels. We have a product called EPC Conversations that allows guests and hotels to communicate with each other, as well as us to communicate with the hotel. And the idea is to layer functionality that, with permission, we will facilitate communication between the guest or ourselves and the hotel to let them know if your flight is delayed, when to expect the guest, ensuring, especially for really late arrivals, that you don't get in a situation like a relocation. Right. So actively being worked on right now, but we have all those building blocks. It's about just tying all those things together.
And would this apply just to lodging or also to rental cars? Are you working on all aspects of a trip?
as I'm sure all of us, if we were to map out all the different connection points between every piece of a trip, there's a ton of them. So we have those detailed and mapped out. We're starting with really the basics, which is air and lodging, but you're going to see us quickly push into other products.
Wow. So let's return to machine learning and how that might apply to customer research. And how are you sort of using these new tools to research the customer and to, as you said, enhance their experience?
So we don't necessarily use machine learning as much to actually do the customer research, but we do employ customer research to validate what we're building through machine learning. And there's a few things that we've started to really pay a lot of attention to that I think are very important for every company as you start to go down that path, which is, number one, machine learning it's created by humans, and humans have bias. And inherently that means that the things that you create have bias, and over time, your algorithm actually can become quite biased. So a great example of that really has nothing to do with the travel space is that they've done sort of tests where they've looked at, we're going to write an image recognition algorithm that's going to identify who's a nurse versus who's a doctor. And because of human bias that then goes into training that algorithm and how it's built, over time, the algorithm starts to identify females as nurses and males as doctors. Now that's obviously not accurate, and it's not the right thing to look at, but that bias can be introduced in how it was built. So we spend a lot of time looking at ways that we can ensure we're not introducing bias. Now for us, it might be a very different scenario. It might be over-biasing or an algorithm sort of learning and reinforcing on itself that it's purely tuned, let's say, for last-minute shoppers. And if you start and you start by having it trained mostly with last-minute shopper type of information, it will essentially work really well for last-minute shoppers and not well for shoppers with longer booking windows. And then what starts to happen is that you, without realizing it, your whole product starts to not be a great product for people with longer booking windows. So we put a lot of thought into just thinking about bias in what we do around machine learning. The second area that is important to keep in mind is as you have machine learning go beyond just tuning a list or really sort of like tuning lists or sort or recommendations, it can actually control what components and what you actually show to customers and to a product manager. And historically I was a product manager. That can be really scary because we're used to knowing exactly what our site looks like and what we're showing to customers. And all of a sudden you don't, right? Because it's algorithms that are determining what's going to be the most useful piece of content to you. So it means you have to change how you think about measuring your site, how you think about monitoring it, and really focusing on those customer outcomes and making sure that as algorithms change and morph which customers see what, you're keeping a very close eye on, are you ultimately achieving that customer's goal and why they're coming to you, which is to find the right travel product for them.
Right. Well, that's interesting then. If you're using this data to serve the product to the customer, you have to straddle that divide between caring for the customer and being creepy.
Yeah.
Right. Then how do you navigate those shoals?
Yes, that is a big debate, I think, in any industry that uses data today. So the first is, as a principle, you really need to make sure that you are explaining to the user why what you're doing. And this actually is just a principle that goes beyond usage of customer data. We want to know why something is happening for us. We want to understand sort of what it is that my data is doing and how it's creating a different experience or how it's being used. So just explaining that is really important. The second thing is that we tend to not use much true personal information. We focus more on things like trip type. One thing that we've discovered is that myself as a traveler and how I travel on a business trip versus how I travel with my son or how I travel with a group of friends are very different trips and have very different needs. So making specific judgments on me as an individual gets to be not only potentially slightly creepy, but also potentially slightly highly inaccurate.
Yeah.
So trip type and things like that we tend to focus on. And then there's, of course, keeping in mind the regulatory space that's constantly evolving and making sure that we're absolutely on top of all of that. So it's something we're learning through, but we definitely believe in a bit more transparency about how we're using that data and making sure that people feel in control.
Right. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that seems to be very hot button-ish or trending in the industry now, and that's attribute-based pricing. And what lessons you're learning from sort of the missteps the airline industry had when it started rolling out ancillary fees?
So what we saw was that, and we found a lot of this through our research. Again, we really do make that sort of the center of how we start to address problem or opportunity spaces. What we saw is that in the airline industry or space, there tended to be pretty clear understanding. If I was a loyal specific carrier, customer, there was decent understanding of how all of the changes, what they meant to me, and what the different levels of tickets were, especially as things like basic economy came out. But what became a big challenge to customers is when you're shopping across partners. And because there was a big lack of consistency, it was an incredibly complex landscape to try and navigate, not always using the same terminology, definitely different levels at which the data was given in terms of granularity. Even things like industry support, GDS support for ancillaries, things was sort of spotty. And so for customers, it became extremely confusing. And I think that's something that we should really keep in mind as we start down this journey in the lodging space, is that consistency and customer understanding when they're shopping across multiple products is going to be absolutely key. And the problem gets compounded with mobile, because with mobile you have much less space to put that information. So we'll have to work together to ensure our customers have a very clear understanding of what they're getting and what the differences are, when the terminology today, even in something like lodging, is quite all over the place. Right. What actually does a deluxe room mean versus a supreme room versus a premier room? I can't tell you. And in many cases, deluxe is higher than one or it's lower than one. It's really quite confusing. The other thing that we should keep in mind that we saw of our customers is that the airline, we had sort of trained everybody that you got to choose your seat, and you got a decent seat, and you got to bring a bag. And so for many, it felt like a huge step down.
Subtractive.
It felt, exactly. It felt like I lost a lot, and I didn't really get anything in return. And there was definitely perception that I didn't necessarily save money. So that's something that we should also keep in mind, although I think it's a bit less of a challenge in the lodging space, because you don't quite have as much that potentially will change, versus a real opportunity to ensure that the things that are most important for our travelers can be clearly called out, and they can specifically pay for those. And that inherently is going to be great for our travelers and great for providers. Great.
Well, this is a good moment to stop and take some questions from the audience, if we could bring them up. Let's see, this one's got 3 thumbs up. Well, where'd it go? It's got 8. This one's got, let's go with this one. Physical location is a key data point for orchestrating a real-time ecosystem. How does Carnival, I think you've got the wrong questions up. Sorry. There, we'll go with this one. Expedia is generally more focused on leisure travel. Will you more aggressively enter the business travel space, and if so, how?
So we have a tremendous offering within the business space called Agencia. We don't plan on that is our premier business travel offering. We have a lot of flagship clients, and it continues to grow. So we'll continue to invest in that. We're also going to ensure that Agencia is able to, and does today, leverage a lot of the technology and supply strength that we have. So that's absolutely where our investments are in the corporate travel space.
Right. How do you see the future of NDC, the new distribution capability, I believe, at Expedia, and will the role for GDS change?
Yes, so if you're following the news, we have started to build out NDC connections with airline partners. The latest we launched Lufthansa, I believe, about 10 days ago, 12 days ago. And so far, it seems to be working quite well for customers and quite well for us and our partners. We will continue to invest in that space. I see it as an and, not a complete replacement. There are absolutely places where NDC makes a lot of sense, and then there are places that it doesn't make as much sense right now. So we'll be thoughtful as we invest in those connections and capabilities. Our focus will be both on ensuring that our customers have access to great fares, but also things like support is really, really important, especially in a space where traditionally there's a lot of apprehension around just support and overall customer service when it comes to airlines. In terms of the GDSs, it's something that we're all going to have to navigate through. I think we're a bit too early to have really specific and strong stances on what it means.
Right.
They're certainly going to be a big part of it.
Let's go with, this one's got 7 thumbs up. Does Expedia have plans to more actively enter the in-stay experience piece of a customer's travel journey? So it depends on what you mean by actively enter. We absolutely believe that because all of those components have downstream effects on each other, and at the end of the day, we want to ensure that travelers have a phenomenal trip experience, not an individual, purely an individual product experience. We need to be a part of that. Journey. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have desire to get into the true in-stay experience. We have companies within our portfolio that help partners create tremendous in-stay experiences. Alice being a company that gives partners insights into sort of the operations of their property and ensures that requests are met quickly and that there's sort of that high-level understanding of what's happening within a property. Those will be the areas that we'll likely focus on when it comes to a true in-stay experience, which is more using technology to enable our partners to create great experiences, not necessarily enter it ourselves, but we will look at how all these pieces fit together and ensuring that the whole trip and that desired outcome comes true for our travelers. Right. I think we have time for one more. Well, this goes to our conversation about attribute-based pricing and hotel fees. Are you worried about traveler pushback on hidden hotel fees?
Yeah. So with fees, there's been a lot in the news recently with fees. To be clear, we are not changing our stance on fees. We do not charge for those fees and will not. We do believe that transparency for travelers is super important. So we will continue to look and test and make sure that we are finding the best way to convey the total price that somebody will pay, because at the end of the day, as a customer, that's sort of what you care about. So that will be through ensuring that there is sort of fairness and transparency in pieces like sort. And we'll continue to work with our customers and our research teams to ensure that our pricing and our overall technologies do the best job to convey that to customers.
Great. Well, thank you, Arthur, for joining us.
Thank you.
And I suppose we're on to our coffee break now. So thank you for your patience.